Welcome to Om Times TV, a division of Om Times Media and Broadcasting. Welcome to What is Going Om, for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on Om Times' flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello and welcome. Back in the early 1930s, when Louise Hay, author of the best-selling book You Can Heal Your Life, was just about learning to read and write, a British medical doctor, pathologist, bacteriologist, and homeopath published a book called Heal Thyself, which claimed that we're all endowed with the wisdom, knowledge, and intuition to create happiness, joy, and health in our lives. That physician was a man called Dr. Edward Bach, and he was the developer of the Bach Flower remedies, which have since helped millions of people around the world restore their emotional, psychological, and physical well-being. And one of his favourite mantras, if you like, is that what we need to be doing now is treating the patient and not the disease. It's taken almost 100 years for science to finally give some credence to Edward Bach's discovery that our emotions govern our physical state. And joining me today to tell us more about how we can heal ourselves is healer, educator, hypnotherapist, and master flower essence practitioner, Dina Saalisi, author of the book and card deck, Listening to Flowers, Positive Affirmations to Invoke the Healing Energy of the 38 Bach Flowers. Dina Saalisi, welcome.
Oh, Sandie, it is so great to be here, and what a beautiful introduction.
Dina, you yourself left behind an entertainment career and a lifetime of chronic pain to guide others in creating personal empowerment to overcome their physical and emotional challenges with Bach Flower remedies and other natural healing modalities. What first drew you in particular to Bach's flower remedies?
Well, I mean, I was quite young at the time. I was probably as young as I could be to embrace it. I was around 18 or 19 years old. And I found his book, Heal Thyself. And, like you stated, just that idea that we are inherently empowered to heal ourselves, was intriguing to me. And, I guess when I look back on my early life, I was always a seeker and, always looking for kind of alternative ways to self-soothe, even though I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time. And so it was just so enchanting for me to recognize that I could work with the energy of flowers to transform emotional states. And so that was, that was like 40, almost 40 years ago. And I've just embraced it and ran with it and really continued to develop my perception of the flowers and to continue to learn more because it really is, I would say, an evolutionary process.
Mm. You know, Bach talked about the personality of the individual being of more importance than the body in treating disease. Treat the patient, not the disease. Look at the characteristics, the temperamental side of the patient, their emotions and their moods, and you have the key to healing. I mean, that is, for that time, it is such an incredible, incredible insight.
Yes. Yeah. He was a revolutionary. And, he was really going against the grain of his colleagues, right? The medical establishment, such that they did toward, while he was doing these writings and these speakings about flower essences, they did threaten to take his medical license away.
Mm.
And he told them, go ahead. And then they never did. So interesting, really interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, but at the same time, before the flowers came
mhm,
homeopathy, and
right.
he was the first person to actually create a vaccine
Yeah,
out of bacteria in the gut, which he thought was, in probably responsible for many, many health, ailments, and ultimately that was so successful that the establishment accepted that.
exactly. Yeah, so they couldn't just cast him aside, right? He was a brilliant man, and he was a scientist. He was.
Mm,
He
yeah.
just kind of, I guess, as he got older and he kept seeing his patients recovering, I think, more quickly and with more ease as he was talking to them about their emotions, that he really felt certain about that, right? He was intuitive, but he was also grounded in wisdom. And so he kind of, took that and developed this whole system that he was really sure about. And it's amazing because it did kind of come more at the end of his life. And I believe it was just only merely a 6-year process from the time he first discovered his first flower, which was the
Mm,
impatiens flower, and then kind of deemed it a complete system of self-healing.
yeah. You know, a lot of people dismiss natural remedies as placebo, mind over matter. I was
Right,
looking earlier at PubMed and
mm,
I saw that there was an analysis of several randomized clinical trials of flower remedies,
right.
and all but one of them were placebo controlled,
Mhm.
and they failed to demonstrate efficacy. That was the conclusion that, they don't show any difference at all. And yet we know that even looking at the placebo effect, it can be effective in as much as 30 to 65% of cases. Why
Yeah.
are they so quick to dismiss things that have such a high rate of efficacy?
I mean, there's a few reasons. I think, capitalism is probably the main reason. But I do think too, when we're working with energy medicines and when we're working with spirituality and when we're working with humanity, it's really hard to track it. It's hard to track the growth and the progress. Like, that's easy for me to do because I work with clients and I see them several times and I keep notes. So just like Bach, over the course of seeing a client, could be a few months, could be a few years, we can really look back at their growth and how they've healed. But so
Mm.
the same is not said when you're doing clinical trials, right? It's like you don't have that space to reflect. And I think that that's a really important point when we're doing psychospiritual healing, when we're relying on the agents of nature. It is a more authentic and a natural approach. So you're not going to get healed instantly. You're not going to get cured instantly. It's not going to be that dramatic. It's going to be more of a subtle process that is lifelong healing, right? Which is a great thing because when we can
Yeah.
embrace healing as a lifelong practice, we're always healing and we're always really more, feeling more in tune with our bodies. And that's the greatest thing, that we're not relying on outside sources. Sometimes we have to, but from my experience, when we're more grounded in our own healing, that then when we need to use outside sources, it comes, at just a better, in a better way. It welcomes us in a better way. We're not reliant on it.
Yeah. Do you think that some of the problems with getting the establishment to accept something like Bach Flower remedies lies in the fact that we're not talking about a physical ailment that you can see. We're talking about an emotion or a
Right.
mood or a thought or a behavior, and they can't quite get their minds around that.
Absolutely. I have a dramatic experience with a woman I worked with. She had a 3-year undiagnosed chronic illness. This mysterious illness came on out of nowhere. She was desperate by the time she called me, right? And she talked and talked, and it was just harrowing listening to her story. And I just listened. And at the end of it, I said, wow, how does all of this make you feel? And she started crying because she said she had seen 100 professionals, everyone from psychics to surgeons. Nobody had ever asked her that question.
Yeah.
I mean, I was awestruck at that. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is the most important question when you're
Right.
using Bach Flower remedies is how do you feel?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's interesting because I have a book, and it is from the 1940s. See if I can hold that up there. And
Mhm.
this is about the medical discoveries, and he treated physical
Mhm.
ailments as well as emotional and mental. And when you read this book and you read about some of his colleagues, physicians who had so much faith in this man and
Yeah.
what he was doing, they did not question it, they supported it. Makes you wonder what's happened to medicine in the years since.
Yeah, and I do I do wonder that often because this is my field. I also feel really heartened that I hear from people all the time, and you know what? The COVID pandemic really, brought a lot of people back around to psychospiritual and alternative natural healing methods. And I
Mm.
hear all the time from people that they're kind of, fed up with the way the establishment handles things. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it is really the time is kind of coming back around. So it is kind of really an exciting time, I feel.
Yeah, yeah. I was talking to someone recently who is a homeopath who has worked at Harvard and an acupuncturist, and he's written a book, revealing how much homeopathy was valued for the treatment of mental health. His book was
Mhm.
called Sane Asylums because many asylums back in the late 1800s, early 1900s were working holistically with homeopathic remedies for people who had mental health issues. That's all gone now.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he said was that it's a paradigm problem. Do you think that the paradigm is changing now, and that the orthodox medical establishment is beginning to accept energy medicine?
I do think it's changing, and I do think that there are physicians that are accepting it and even speaking out about it. I think my biggest fear is that the media doesn't really let their voices rise. So that, yeah, that's what I see happening. Like I know many physicians who are embracing it, and I mean, we can even point to books of MDs who've written books and say, yeah, this is great and this works. But then, they get called quacks, right, by the establishment. Or if you go on Wikipedia and even look at flower essence remedies, it's just all it says is placebo, placebo, right? It never wants to give credence to the fact that people all over the world, their lives have been changed by it, right?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Well, I've been using them for, I would say 30, 35 years. I use them on my dog. Now, the placebo effect cannot come into play when you're talking about an animal,
Right.
and they worked amazingly. And I've used them on my children and my grandchildren ever since with great success. So tell me, what are the most common things that you are encountering today in your clients? Are there, I know everybody has to be treated differently, but are there common concerns like anxiety, depression, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I work mostly with women. I do work with men as well, but it's women who mostly come and step forward. And I work a lot with trauma survivors. So, it's not enough to just name it trauma or anxiety or depression, right? We have to go underneath the layers. So, really what I've discovered is that there are several I would say innate states of being that we come into the world with that then just because we're in human form and we're raised by human beings and we live in this difficult planet that we kind of suppress these innate ways of being. So like, one thing I see is that especially with women, there's a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot of negative body image. So, like, to me, this kind of falls under the category of self love, right? And we hear a lot about, like, how do you enact self love? Self love's the foundation of all love. And it's easy to kind of recognize that, but it's really hard to embrace it. So I see the flowers come in and help women with this all the time. Pine is one of my favorite. And when we look at a great towering pine tree, we don't even notice it when it's flowering because the flowers aren't very attractive, honestly, and they're very short-lived. They bloom for like a week or 2 weeks. But this remedy is really all about helping us to embrace our true nature of self acceptance. And it's when we kind of replay those stories in our mind and tell ourselves we're not good enough or we're bad, and we really believe it. So I really see the flowers help us to change that story. Yeah. And
Yeah,
that is incredible.
I'm really glad you brought up the question of trauma, because one of the major issues of these times for many women is healing from sexual trauma.
Yeah.
Um, and when you were on the No BS Spiritual Book Club a few weeks ago, you had on your list of books, your favourite books, a book called The Courage to Heal, a guide for women survivors of child sexual abuse by Ellen Bass and Laura Davis, in which they shared many stories of women who'd survived childhood sexual abuse. That is a big one, a
It is.
very, very big one, and we're hearing a lot about it now. What sort of remedies, apart from pine, would you give to a woman who is coming to terms with that and wanting the imprint of that out of her life?
Right. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. So I think that Star of Bethlehem is the remedy that Bach points to for trauma. And the thing that's great about Star is that you can work with it if you experienced something recently or if it was from many, many years ago. It doesn't matter as long as you're recognizing that the trauma is still stuck. Like a lot of people come and it's still kind of running their lives. And so being
Mm.
able to recognize it is the first step, and that's wonderful. And it's actually one of the 5 flowers in rescue remedy. And so often what I'll do is when people are really entrenched in trauma, like they just can't see a way out of it, but they know they want to heal, I might give them rescue remedy for a week to just kind of work with that to open the layer. But Star of Bethlehem is just this beautiful shining star that points us to our true nature. And it kind of, it doesn't, the thing that's great about the flowers, they don't just erase it. It's not like, oh yeah, that, no, I don't have that anymore. What the star does is it helps us to be able to work where we need to work to heal the trauma and feel really supported and nourished.
Yeah, yeah. Mm. Bach used, I mean, he studied homeopathy before he came across the flowers. Do you think that there are a lot of similarities between the two?
Absolutely. I use homeopathy myself. I'm not a homeopath, and I don't typically prescribe to people, but I've used homeopathy for as long as I've been using the flowers, and I've even toyed with the idea. I've reached out to some homeopath friends that we could do a class where we could take, like, the flowers and match them up to homeopathic remedies. Many of my students are homeopaths, and they do the same. They'll give someone a homeopathic, and they'll also give them a flower essence. So yeah, it is a beautiful partnership, and it really, it empowers both sides, I would say.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. One of the things I loved about Bach was, as long ago as the late 1920s, he said that science is tending to show that life is harmony, a state of being in tune, and that disease is discord or a condition when a part of the whole is not vibrating in unison. Science in his day may well have started tending to show that, but I think it kind of disappeared, over many decades since then, because we're only beginning to come back to that right now, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like, let us not forget that science isn't magic. What it is it's the study of nature. That everything it does studies nature so that we can utilize it to, to better, hopefully to better society, to better ourselves. But I feel like it gets stuck in, that goes back to the first part, the capitalism part, that if we could
Yeah,
sell a drug or sell an operation,
yeah,
it's very lucrative. And it's kind of like selling fear. So it's like if we don't put forward that, natural healing works, and you really don't have to be afraid of illness or afraid of your body and trust in its capacity to heal, then that kind of takes the product off the table in a way.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of fear in the pharmaceutical industry. Same with the insurance industry.
Right.
What they're selling is fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting too that it's taken, again, over 100 years for medicine to start recognizing what Bach knew early on is the importance of the gut microbiome.
Right. Yeah, and like you pointed to, that's kind of where he started out as a
Mm,
bacteriologist, and,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, like just what great research we've had in that 100 years.
Do you use it for physical ailments? If somebody came to you and said, I've got a problem going on in my gut and I don't know how
Mhm.
to resolve it, would you give them a flower remedy?
Well, I would, but it wouldn't be based on their what they're experiencing physically. I wanna give people the opportunity to, of course, talk about what they're experiencing physically, because it's important. We are in physical bodies, and sometimes it's painful, and that's real. We're experiencing pain, that's real. It's not in your mind. So, we have to kind of, like, dig through all of that, and then by the end of a session, like, we'll get to, like, well, how does it make me feel? Or what, maybe we can dial it back, like, what was going on when this started? And a lot of
Mm,
times the light bulb will go off. They'll be like, "Oh, yeah, that really happened to me in my life." And then suddenly, I have a backache, or, I have a stomach problem. And then we can kind of treat it from there. And I've had that with so many people. I mean, one of my most dramatic results was with a woman who had MS. And I mean, we've all heard, MS, she was bedridden when she came to me. And, she couldn't get out of bed, literally. She was literally in bed the first time I saw her. And I worked with her for about 4 months. By the end of it, she first of all, she connected the physical ailment to when she lost her job, and she felt powerless, and she was a woman who really liked control. Many of us like control, and, so we worked on the control part. We didn't talk about her body at all. I wasn't like, "Well, so how what's your what are you doing with your doctor?" It was like she had her doctor, and she had me, and we worked on the control issue. By the end of 4 months, she was only in bed 1 day a week because she chose to rest. And, she took on, a job that was, working with other people, helping them to heal from MS, so it was such a dramatic transformation. I never talked to her about her physical ailment.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, we may get something going on with our gut, and we often do not think that it is an emotional issue.
Yeah,
Apart from things like IBS, which are associated with stress,
right.
and they rarely have a cure for, but that could be treated with flower remedies.
Yeah, and even the word stress, like you said at the beginning, emotions, like, they're mysterious, they're energy. So we can say we have an emotion, but it's hard to prove it because it's invisible, right? You're saying, "I feel this way." And then stress, like, what even is it? They say it's the number one killer, but we don't even see it, and oftentimes we don't even know we're stuck in it, right? We just kinda go about our lives
Mm.
thinking we're managing it, but we're not until our bodies give us the signals. So I see the physical ailment as like the wake up bell, the signal for, okay, now you need to look within. And that's how I work with myself. Like, just when a physical ailment comes up, and you spoke of Louise Hay at the beginning, and this connects the affirmation part, like, I might feel my physical ailment. Sometimes the first thing I do before I reflect on the emotion is I'll pick up the Louise Hay book and look at the physical ailment and then connect it to the affirmation. And then that'll help me to understand, oh, yeah, maybe the burdens I'm carrying are too much. And then I'll look at the emotions, then I'll give myself maybe a flower remedy for it. So, yeah, the words, the spoken word starts to change the story. And then the flower is the energy medicine that sort of tends to the story and kind of opens it up.
Mm. There have been many books written about the flower remedies, listing the remedies and what kind of, emotions and thoughts and things that it will help with. But your one, which is your new book and card deck, which I'll show our viewers now, is listening to flowers. And you're looking at the affirmations, positive affirmations to invoke the healing energy. How can a positive affirmation invoke the healing energy?
Yeah. Well, I think just like I said, it starts to change your story. And the way it does this is that each affirmation I wrote specifically connects to the healing quality of each flower. So it's not just randomly, like feel good affirmations. They're very specific to each flower. So, when I give somebody a combination flower remedy, there might be up to 7 flowers in it. And I tell them to use the affirmations that correspond to each flower. And I started doing this, I started giving it to friends. I did it with myself and I gave it to friends. And they were like, wow, this is mind blowing. It really helps me to understand not only what I'm taking, but also like how my mind is shifting, how the words help me to shift my perspective around it. So I started giving it to clients, and lo and behold, everyone was like just healing at a quicker rate. And so it's the power of the spoken word. We speak it out loud because I believe that when you say things out loud, you're kind of solidifying it. And all too often, we say things that are negative in our minds and out loud. And we believe that as truth. And so, yeah, so I just find that the words really help us to transform and to connect with the healing properties. And yeah, and then the transformation just comes at a quicker rate.
How did you come up with the affirmations?
I was studying to be a Bach practitioner, and it was my own way of remembering what each remedy was for. I've always loved poetry and writing, and so it's kind of, the 3 lines are sort of loosely based on haiku, right? I would just like look at the flower, take the essence, and then I would just jot down the words, the lyrics that would come to me. And then I refined them when I wanted to kind of like make it into a book and offer it to people. But yeah, it was an intuitive process, but it was also grounded in just the knowing, the reverence for the words. Yeah.
So You were, like Bach himself, using your intuition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And again, he was way ahead of his time, talking about our higher self and our intuition being, the best tool that we have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a short break now. And when we come back, we'll hear about more flower remedies for different ailments that you can work with and more about Dina's journey. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a few moments.
Om Times TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of Om Times' flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And as an author, editor, and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who have walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees, and no BS. Just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Dina Saalisi, before the break, we spoke about you being on the No BS Spiritual Book Club a few weeks ago. Another one of the books that was one of your favourites was the German flower, by the German flower therapy practitioner, Mechthild Schäfer, in which she interprets the 38 Bach flower remedies from a more contemporary psychospiritual exploration. You said that her words helped you expand your awareness of how deeply the remedies affect us at the soul level. Tell me more about the soul level and how one can use flower remedies in that regard.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this book was and is still important to me because she really does, look into each flower and look with more depth. She's a psychologist, so she looks with more depth into the spiritual and the emotional relevancy of each flower. And so, yeah, our soul journey. I mean, when I think of just nature and flowers specifically, it's like they are part of our soul experience. They're so miraculous. And, we're used to them because they're part of humanity ever since the dawn of time. And they just grow. And so I believe that that is part of our soul journey, is to be connected to nature. And, the more we can rest into this, the more our soul experience becomes enlivened. And so, again, that goes back to the piece of like the soul's invisible, it's not provable. Yet, so many of us know, we know it's there. We know we have a higher purpose.
Yeah.
We know that the birds sing for a reason, that there's this, I think that's the looking inward piece, and that's what I love so much about flower therapy is it asks us to reflect inwardly. We're not just saying, this hurts, how can I make it stop? We're saying, this hurts, and where does that come from, and how can I grow? So I think that's the sole purpose is like looking at how we can grow from the experience, whether it's bad, good, and everything in between.
If I said to you, I really want to deepen a connection with my higher self, my soul, I would like to develop whatever gifts I might have, intuitive, whatever. What sort of remedies would you suggest?
Yeah, well, Serato is the flower that is for developing your intuition. And so we like to look at the challenge first because it's not enough to say I'd like to have better intuition, like what gets in the way of that. And so if you're somebody who questions your inner knowing, right? And we have that a lot, and that goes back to the trauma part too. Like when we've experienced trauma, often we don't know what's right or wrong, especially if it came at an early age. So this is often a first step that I'll use with people if they're questioning themselves, like, oh, I just don't know. And I always go outside of myself to ask others for advice, or I'm always Googling, right? Like Googling is a verb now in our dictionary, in our modern dictionary, and it means to look outside of yourself for the answers. Sure, sometimes we have to research and we have to reflect outside, but it's the inner knowing that's always going to put you in the right direction. So the Serato remedy helps you to embrace the truth of your inner knowing and to really trust it, I would say. So to trust that it's alive within you and that it's real, right? Because like when we don't embrace our inner knowing, then we are always reliant on outside sources, and that often doesn't serve us well.
Mm, yeah. You spoke earlier about how many people since the pandemic are beginning to look at more natural remedies. Um, Many people turn to homeopathy to help ward off some or ease some of the symptoms of COVID. Um, would flower remedies help in the same way if somebody is afraid of COVID still?
Absolutely. One of the remedies that I saw, especially in the early days, like when we were all in lockdown, was aspen. And aspen is one of the fear remedies, and it's for fear fear with no known reason. So sort of that feeling of just like utter fear, but we don't really know why. And even though we knew it was like we don't want to get sick, nobody really knew what was happening. And so there was a lot of like fear of the unknown going on. And so I prescribed a lot of aspen. I took it myself. And that really helped people to recognize like their inner strength, their courage, so that then they can kind of deal with that, with what we were all dealing with. So, yes, I mean, I used a lot of flower remedies during the pandemic. And what I saw was that, many of us, we did have to kind of rely on pharmaceuticals. We worked with vaccine. And even that was a little fearful because it was new and a lot of us were uncertain and we wanted to be able to use it, but we also wanted to feel safe in it. And so what I noticed was that like people who were using the vaccine but were afraid of it, they weren't doing well. Like, they would still get sick and they would, you know what I mean? And so it was like my job to kind of like, well, you made this decision, you're gonna take the vaccine. Now, how can we kind of work with the fear aspect so that you're getting the most of all of the healing?
Mm, yeah, yeah. You offer information in your book on how to set deeper intentions. How
Mhm.
would you do that with a flower remedy?
Well, I think it goes back to the process of looking inward. So when I'm looking inward and I'm trying to discover, what it is I want to heal or what's kind of provoked right now, I have to set an intention. Again, because this isn't magic, even though it is magical. There is a human component to it. Like we're talking about words and affirmation. That's very human when we're dealing with language. So I do feel like setting the intention is partly with the words, the lyric that we're using, and just recognizing where it is that we want to grow. Because sometimes we don't know. And that's also part of the process. I'm a health coach. So, it's like pre-contemplation, contemplation. You're like, when is the client or when is the human ready to heal? And sometimes we're not quite ready, but we know there's something there. So that might be the intention stage where we're like
Mm,
setting intention and then kind of trusting the road to open up.
mm. You use Bach's own language in your deck and the book, listening to flowers. Why did you do that?
Um, I'm kind of an original girl. Like I kind of wanted to dig into the origins of the system. I mean, now, nearly 100 years later, there's like, I don't know, 600 flower remedy makers worldwide. And it's great. I love it. I love to think that every single flower has a spiritual component. That said, when I'm teaching, I really want to ground people in the original method. And it's a lot easier that way. There's only 38 flowers. So, like, to get really proficient at that and then go on to like all of the energy of flowers is really helpful. But I wanted to use his language because I think there's a lot in that. First of all, he broke all of the 38 flowers down into 7 emotional categories. And I do believe that I'm the only book that breaks it down into the emotional categories. And I'm amazed at that because I'm like, it helps people. And I teach it based on the categories. So the first category is fear. And so whenever I teach a course, we start with fear. Well, what a relevant category. And right away, people can dig into that. So it's like then when you're working with somebody, if they have fear, I can automatically think of those 5 flowers. I don't have to like sort through all the flowers. That's not to say that other flowers wouldn't help with fear, but these are like, the 5 originals. So yes, I wanted to use his language to kind of ground everyone in his original wisdom.
Well, there's something too about the grace and the dignity of the way people used to speak back then. That adds some kind of gravitas to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, if I were to only have one flower remedy in the house,
Uh-huh.
and I knew I needed to take something else,
Mhm.
could I set an intention that that flower remedy that I've got would have the same effect as the one that I can't get a hold of at that moment?
Probably not. And I say that because so like, there's 3 reasons a flower remedy doesn't work because sometimes people come and they say, it didn't do its trick. And the first reason is it's just not the right remedy. So I do think specificity is important. That said, if that flower that you have is like one of your type flowers, like, we all have flowers that we're going to personally respond to more strongly, right? Because it's our way of being. Like for instance, I am an impatience flower. So what that means is I'm very quick acting. My mind moves really fast. Well, sure, I have a bottle of impatience in my medicine cabinet because I can fall into that state quite quickly. So I could just take the 2 drops and then it'll kind of like resolve really quick because I'm not ever going to rid myself of that way of being, nor would I want to. It serves me in a lot of ways. So, yeah, if you have a type remedy that kind of works for you over and over and there's sort of a thing that gets, provoked in you, that's great. But if you're sensing that, oh, there's something deeper here, like it's not just my impatience way of being, maybe I'm more irritable than usual, then I'll kind of need to revisit the list and kind of look at, what's provoking that irritability.
So when you talk about having, your own flower, it's a bit like the constitutional in homeopathics, where there is a constitutional that, is the best one for you and your particular
Mhm.
makeup.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
How would
That's
you
exactly.
how would you discover your own flower?
Well, I think that they kind of come to you. When I was learning the flowers, there were just a couple that kind of kept speaking to me. And when I was learning them, like I was like, yes, that's me. Yes, that's me. And that's what I noticed with my students too. And I kind of push my students in that direction. I'll tell them, when you're reading through the flowers and when you're hearing me speak about them, make check marks next to the ones that feel most relevant, because those are likely the ones that are going to be like your flowers.
Using your intuition again as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
There were 12 remedies. There was a
Ori-
book published, The 12 Healers, and then others came on afterwards.
Mhm.
Are they considered, the other ones, the later ones, are they considered in any way lesser or supportive of the other 12?
Yeah, they're not considered lesser. In fact, I think by the end of his life, Bach was sort of he shied more away from the 12 being like the 12 strong ones. They were just the 12 originals. And so I think that he had like the most groundedness in those flowers. But then as he discovered all 38, he said, these are the 38. And, everyone's going to kind of embrace them differently. So no, I don't see that the 12 healers, the 12 originals are the ones that are the most relevant. Not at all. Like the second 19 and then the second 19 and then the rest. I can see somebody kind of needing each of those more specifically based on who they are. Yeah.
Some people say that they are not as relevant as they used to be, that times have changed, astrology's changed.
Mhm.
There are different things that people are suffering with now, and that, in a sense, they're old hat. What
Mhm.
do you think about that?
I think, to quote my Bach teacher, you can do everything with the 38. You can. And, when I start with a client, I do work with some of the other flower essence remedies. I work with the Flower Essence Society in California. I work with about 50 of their flowers, so even more than the Bach. But I always start clients out and students out on simply the Bach flowers. And then after I'm working with somebody for a time, I might hear another flower that I've learned that's a newer flower, a new age flower. But that said, it's like, yes, if I needed to only work with the Bach 38, I would be good and that would do everything. What I see with the newer flowers is, well, first of all, I love that there's, like I said, an emotional correspondent to every flower. Like I could be hiking in the woods and see filigree and just be like, oh my gosh, yes, this has a spiritual meaning as well. And I wonder, had Bach lived, another 20 years, would he have discovered more flowers? Well, I bet he would have. And so what I find with the newer flowers is that they might be a little bit more nuanced, right? So yeah, I think it's all relevant. And I encourage everyone to work with flower energy however they feel called to.
What do you think about hybrid flowers? I mean, nowadays we can marry anything together to make something else. Do you think that if you were to make a remedy from a hybrid, what would happen?
I don't know, but perhaps I'll have to try
Yeah, that would be
that.
interesting.
So I do, yeah, I make flower remedies. I mostly make them just as a spiritual practice. I do keep them and then I'll use them, but I make them because it's such a beautiful process. And I do have a YouTube video, if anyone goes to my YouTube channel, how to make a flower essence remedy. It's only about 10 minutes long, but it shows the complete process. And there's even photos on my Instagram. Like when you put those flowers in the bowl of water, it's divine. And what I noticed the very first time I made a flower essence remedy, and I did it as it was a homework assignment for a flower essence class I was taking, and I did it, and I put the bowls in the flowers in the bowl of water, and you're supposed to wait like 3 to 4 hours. And I thought that I might do it and then go in the house and get some work done, but instantly I was mesmerized. And what I noticed was that all of the elements of nature were at play. So the water is, of course, the water. The flowers are the earth. The sun is catalyzing fire. It's catalyzing it. So that's the fire. And the air like stirs it. So it's like you just sit there and you're mesmerized. And that in itself was like a healing and an eye opening for me. So when I teach the course, that's a homework assignment I give. And it can be, you can use any flower, it doesn't matter. It's more to just experience the process of what it's like to see these flowers, creating medicine.
What
It's
about
amazing.
the idea that you really should be local, eat local food, work with locally grown flowers? Anything that is shipped around the world doesn't have the same quality for you. What do you think about that one?
That's interesting. Well, I live in California, so I would say many, if not most, of the Bach flowers do grow here naturally. So I'm lucky. Like, there's, oak tree, walnut, white chestnut right outside my door. And so often I'll go and I'll just sit and commune with the flowers. As far as only using local flowers, I feel this is different because it's medicine. So I don't know. I feel that they all work. But then I guess if I do reflect on it, like, scleranthus, that's a flower that I have not been able to grow. And so I don't think it is local to my environment just because I can't grow it. And it's for indecision. So it's the one where you can't decide, you can't make a choice. So I make the joke that the plant itself is fickle because I didn't know, does it want more water? Does it want less water? Does it want sun? Doesn't it want sun? So, that said, this isn't a local flower, and interestingly, when I think about it, I don't tend to use it very often, but that could just be because that's me, and like we know, even with homeopathy and with any healing, every healer is gonna work a little differently. So the same with flower essence practitioners. No 2 practitioners are gonna prescribe exactly the same way because we're gonna hear things differently, and that might have something to do with our local environment, sure.
Mm. I heard a little while ago that the Bach flower remedies we buy today are not the same as they were 10 or 20 years ago, that something has been changed. Do you know anything about that?
I don't, and I don't believe that to be true. I mean, the flowers that are made at the Bach Center are still a lot of them are still from the same trees, the same, I think, rock waters from the same spring. So, those are the same. And of course, we can say environmentally, the world's not the same. That said, that I think our physiology has caught up with that. So I do think that, whatever the essence is, if they're a little more tainted, let's say, I do think that they still hold the same spiritual vibration and that they relate to our physiology in the right way.
Mm. Well, there are so many books around, and the remedies themselves, you can buy them at Whole Foods and Sprouts and lots of good health stores. Why would a person want to come and consult a practitioner if they can get all the information themselves?
Yeah, well, like I said, I think most of the people who find are they're in kind of a way where they need to do deeper healing work. So when you're working with a practitioner, I think most of the practitioners I know are very good because we're trained in this system of deeper self-awareness, right? That's what the flower therapy does for us. So the practitioner will help you to gain deeper self-awareness and work on deeper issues. And like, I'm a health coach and I'm a hypnotherapist. So people benefit from my expertise in, like, I can give them practices to work with, or I might do a guided visualization. So it's like when you want to do deeper spiritual healing, deeper emotional
Mm.
healing, or when you have this physical challenge that you really need guidance on, I do think practitioners help. And I mean, even good practitioners see other practitioners, that we all need support. And sometimes we need that perspective from another that's going to guide us. And I think that all good healers are doing just that. They're guiding, they're not telling, they're not fixing, they're
Yeah.
guiding. So I'm the conduit for the energy.
Mm. So if anyone listening says, yeah, I'd be interested to experiment with these, and I think they could be very useful for my children as well.
Yeah.
Um, could you tell us how do you use them? If you're doing it yourself, not seeing a practitioner, what is the protocol?
Right. Well, Bach meant it to be a self-help system first and foremost. His definitions of the flowers in his book are very brief. They're like a couple of sentences per flower, which is great because it's meant to be simple. So I would suggest that everybody get Bach's book and look at his definitions first, and then there's many great books out there. And just reading about the remedies, and like I said, just make check marks to the ones that feel most relevant, and they come clear. It's meant to come clear to you. It's not meant to be shrouded in mystery. So I do find that they're very accessible and easy to work with by yourself.
What's the correct number of drops to take?
So it's for a combination formula, you would take 4 drops of the combination formula you would take it 4 times a day. But if you're using a single remedy, it's 2 drops of each remedy. So if you're mixing a formula, you wanna mix 2 up to 7 flowers in 1 bottle. So that would be 2 drops of each remedy. And from a homeopathic perspective, 2 drops. It's like it's the quantum amount. It's the most minute amount we can use that has the most power.
Mm. You have a new book coming out, The Art of Flower Therapy, a comprehensive guide to using the energy of flowers to heal, thrive, and live a vibrant life. Tell us about that book.
Yeah, so this is basically my 8-week course in a book form. It's great because it teaches everything. So it goes over every single part of how to use flower essence remedies. It's complete, and each flower has either a case study or a personal experience of my own, which really helps people to understand the remedies better. So with this book, I'm really excited because it'll reach more people and they'll really be able to start working with remedies right away.
When is it coming out?
It should be coming out in the fall, but hopefully by winter. Yeah.
Mm. And you've got another book. I don't know whether this one has been published or is about to be published. Find Your Animal, a spiritual guide to self-discovery.
Thank you. Yeah, that one is a little older, about a year ago, and I was actually hired by a British publisher to write that book. And so it's true. I wrote it about animal energy, just based on the energy of animals. So I kind of used my wisdom around dealing with the flowers to kind of look at different animals, and that's a really fun one too.
And yeah, I think it's important to let our viewers know that you can use flower remedies with your pets as well.
Absolutely, I do it all the time, just a
Mm.
couple of drops in their water bowl, and, yeah, it might be harder to discern what they're experiencing, but we know, are they clingy? Are they barking too much? And, yeah, we just kinda use the corresponding remedy, and that's in the upcoming book too. There's a section on pets.
Mm. So are you using them all the time on yourself?
I do. I make myself a personal formula once a month. It never gets old. It's like there's always something that I could use support with. And again, it's not a crutch. It really helps me to gain deeper self awareness and to become stronger and more empowered.
Would you combine it with astrology? I mean, if, for example, you had an astrologer tell you, okay, you've got some hard aspects coming up next month. You may have this could happen, that could happen. You need to be a bit more careful of accidents, etc. Could you then transform that into a remedy?
I suppose you could. I mean, sometimes you can definitely use them prophylactically. Like I would say the best remedy to use that way is rescue remedy, the
Mm.
combination formula. And we use that often like when there's something coming up that we're anticipating and we're really anxious about it. We can just use rescue remedy. I wouldn't suggest kind of going inward and being like, well, I want to stave this off, so I'm going to use a flower. I would say more just kind of let the energy take its course and then see where you're at with it. Because again, you might react differently to that challenge than someone else would.
Yeah. Exam time is a great time that I used to use rescue remedy with my children. Yeah.
Yeah,
Help
yeah.
them, just be calm and clear. Dina, it's been a treat speaking with you. Thank you so much. I love, I said earlier, I'm not really a card person. I love this deck of cards. It is so easy to use and it's so beautifully illustrated. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Sandie. A pleasure always.
So, listening to Flowers, positive affirmations to invoke the healing energy of the 38 Bach Flowers by Dina Saalisi comes in the form of a 4-colour card deck and a 90-page book. It's beautifully illustrated by Audrey Violet and it is published by Red Feather. So, check it out. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer and I'll be back with another edition of What Is Going On at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me and a heartfelt thank you to Dina Saalisi.